Welcome to AfroKorean Stories, where unforgettable African, Korean romances and dramas come alive. Before we begin, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a like to support the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Now, let's dive into today's story. The gunshot shattered the crystal chandelier above Amina's head, and she hit the marble floor hard, Min Jae's body covering hers before she could even scream. Glass rained down like deadly snow, and through the chaos of panicked voices and running feet, she heard him whisper against her ear, his breath hot and urgent. "Stay down. Don't move. I've got you." This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen. 48 hours ago, Amina Yusuf was just another exhausted Nigerian woman working 3 jobs in Seoul, trying to survive, trying to send money home, trying to keep her head above water in a city that barely saw her. Now she was lying beneath a Korean crime lord at his brother's wedding reception while bullets tore through the celebration. And the terrifying part wasn't the danger. The terrifying part was that she didn't want him to let go. But let's go back. Let's go back to where it all started, because that's where the real danger began, in a moment so ordinary she almost missed it. Thursday night at the Azure Lounge in Gangnam. Amina's feet were screaming in her heels after 7 hours of carrying champagne to people who looked through her like she was furniture. The music was too loud, the air was thick with expensive perfume and entitlement, and she had exactly 45 minutes before she had to run across the city to her overnight shift at the convenience store. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another reminder that her sister Zainab's university tuition was 3 weeks overdue. 3 weeks, and the school was sending final notices. 3 weeks, and Amina was running out of options, running out of time, running out of everything except exhaustion. She was clearing glasses from a corner table when she felt it. That particular weight of being watched. She'd learned to sense it in Seoul, that feeling of eyes that didn't just look but assessed, calculated, judged. She turned, and that's when she saw him for the first time. He was sitting alone in the VIP section, which was unusual because men like him never sat alone. Men who wore suits that probably cost more than her annual rent. Men who had that kind of dangerous stillness that made everyone else look like they were moving too fast. Men whose eyes could strip you down to your bones without blinking. He was watching her with an intensity that should have frightened her, but Amina had stopped being frightened of powerful men a long time ago. She'd learned that fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She met his gaze directly, held it for 3 seconds, then went back to her work. Behind her, she heard one of his companions say something in rapid Korean, and the man Min Jae, though she didn't know his name yet, replied in a voice like smoke and whiskey. "Anio. She's perfect." The next morning, Friday, Amina was halfway through her shift at the Itaewon Cafe when he walked in. She recognized him immediately, those same calculating eyes, but in daylight he looked younger than she'd thought, maybe 36. With a kind of face that could sell cologne or break hearts or order executions. Probably all 3. He ordered an Americano in perfect English and sat by the window, and Amina went back to making drinks, pretending her pulse hadn't jumped. She was wiping down the counter when he approached, and his first words were so unexpected she actually laughed. "I have a business proposition for you, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." "I'm already saying no," Amina replied, not looking up from the counter. 6 million won for 1 weekend. Her hand stopped moving. 6 million won. That was almost 5 months of combined income from all her jobs. That was Zainab's tuition and 3 months of rent and maybe, finally, a chance to breathe. She looked up at him, and his expression was completely serious. "What kind of weekend are we talking about?" she asked carefully. "My younger brother is getting married tomorrow in Pyeongchang. My family expects me to bring someone. Someone suitable. Someone who can handle herself in difficult social situations." He paused, and something flickered in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. "I need a woman who won't be intimidated, who won't fall apart under pressure, and who can walk away at the end of the weekend and forget this ever happened." "And you think I'm that woman because?" "Because last night, Director Kim from Samsung insulted you in Korean, assuming you wouldn't understand. And you smiled at him, refilled his glass, and whispered in perfect Korean that his wife called earlier looking for him. You didn't flinch. You didn't break. You just handled it. He leaned forward slightly. I need someone who can handle my family the same way. Before you judge Amina for what she said next, before you think about what you would do differently, remember that desperation has a way of making impossible choices seem reasonable. Remember that she had a sister counting on her, a family back home that needed her, and a life that felt like it was always one paycheck away from collapse. So when she asked, "What exactly would I have to do?" she wasn't being naive. She was being a survivor. They met that evening in a private room at a restaurant in Gangnam, and Min Jae laid it all out. His family ran what he carefully called import and export businesses, which Amina understood immediately meant things that probably shouldn't be imported or exported. His father, Chairman Choi, was old-fashioned and believed that a man Min Jae's age should be married, or at least seriously involved. The family pressure had become unbearable, especially with his younger brother Dae-hyun's wedding happening. Min Jae needed someone to play the role of his girlfriend for the weekend, someone who could convince his family that he was capable of a serious relationship, someone who could then disappear cleanly afterward. And what's your story about how we met? Amina asked, because she'd learned that details mattered in lies. Charity gala 6 months ago. You were volunteering for an international education non-profit. I was there representing family business interests. We argued about the effectiveness of direct aid versus systematic change. I found you fascinating. We've been seeing each other quietly since then because you wanted to keep it private until you were sure about us. That's actually a good story, Amina admitted. I don't do things halfway, Min Jae said, and the way he looked at her made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the money. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos and brief bios of his family members. His mother, Madam Choi, elegant and formidable. His father, Chairman Choi, who looked like he could order your death without raising his voice. His brother Dae-hyun and his fiancée. His sister Soo-jin. Various business associates and extended family. Amina studied each face, committing them to memory. One more thing, Min Jae said, and his voice dropped lower. My world is dangerous. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because you need to understand what you're walking into. If you feel unsafe at any point, you tell me. If you want to leave, you leave. The money is yours regardless. Why? Amina asked. Why give me an out if you need me there? His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something raw behind the careful control. Because I'm already asking too much. I won't ask you to stay somewhere you don't want to be. That should have been a red flag. That should have been the moment Amina walked away. Instead, she heard herself say, I'll do it. But I have conditions. Name them. Half the money up front. Tomorrow morning before we leave. And if your family gets aggressive or disrespectful, I walk. I don't care how much money is involved. I won't be anyone's punching bag. Min Jae smiled, and it transformed his face completely. Deal. I'll have my driver pick you up at 6 a.m. Pack for a weekend at a nice hotel, formal events, outdoor activities. Everything else will be provided. They shook hands, and Amina felt the calloused strength of his grip, the heat of his palm against hers. When he pulled away, she felt the loss of that warmth more than she wanted to admit. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button because trust me, you won't want to miss where this is going. Drop a like if you're already hooked, and stick around because Amina's weekend is about to get a whole lot more complicated. Saturday morning came too fast. Amina stood outside her tiny apartment in Yeongdongpo at 5:45 a.m., wearing the nicest dress she owned and holding a small weekend bag, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. When the black Mercedes pulled up with tinted windows and a driver who looked like he could break someone in half, she almost turned around and went back inside. But then the back door opened, and Min Jae stepped out. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a black sweater, and he looked more human than he had in his suits, more real. He saw her hesitation and walked over, stopping a respectful distance away. Second thoughts. he asked quietly. 10th or 11th thoughts, Amina admitted. We can call this off right now. I'll still give you the money for your time and discretion. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. He was nervous. This powerful, dangerous man was actually nervous about her decision. Let's go, she said. Before I change my mind again. The drive to Pyeongchang took 3 hours through mountains that looked like they belonged in paintings. Amina sat in the back seat next to Min Jae, and the space between them felt electric with unspoken things. He briefed her on family dynamics, speaking in that low, controlled voice that made her lean closer to hear. My father will test you, he said. He tests everyone. He'll be cold, dismissive, looking for weakness. Don't try to win him over. Just hold your ground. And your mother? My mother is more dangerous than my father because she's subtle about it. She'll smile while she cuts you down. She'll ask questions that sound innocent but are designed to expose you as unsuitable. You're really selling this weekend, Amina said dryly. Min Jae almost smiled. My sister Soo-jin is the only one you might actually like. She's genuine. Curious. She'll probably ask you 1,000 questions because she's never seen me with anyone before. Never. Amina raised an eyebrow. A man who looks like you, with your kind of money? I've never brought anyone to meet my family, he clarified. I've never wanted to. So why now? He turned to look at her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Because the pressure was becoming unbearable. Because my father was threatening to arrange something himself. Because I needed someone strong enough to survive a weekend with my family. And the moment I saw you handle Director Kim without breaking, I knew. Knew what? That you were stronger than anyone I'd ever met. Amina's heart was hammering now, and she forced herself to look away, out the window at the passing mountains. You don't know me. Not yet, he agreed. But I'd like to. The Choi family estate appeared around a curve in the mountain road, and Amina's breath stopped altogether. It wasn't just a house. It was a compound, a fortress disguised as a traditional Korean estate, all sweeping rooflines and modern glass and enough land to get lost in. Security cameras were visible everywhere, and men in dark suits stood at strategic points. This wasn't wealth. This was power. Still time to turn back, Min Jae said quietly. And miss all this? Amina gestured at the intimidating estate. Not a chance. His hand found hers, just for a moment, a quick squeeze of reassurance. Thank you. For being here. For being brave enough to do this. Before she could respond, the car stopped, and they were surrounded by staff opening doors and reaching for bags. Min Jae exited first and extended his hand to help her out, and Amina stepped into his world trying not to show how terrified she actually was. Madam Choi was waiting in the main entrance, a woman in her early 60s who wore a traditional hanbok-like armor and had eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Amina with an expression that could have frozen fire, and when she spoke in English, her accent was British crisp. So you are the young woman my son has been hiding from us. Mother, Min Jae said, his voice carrying a warning. I wasn't hiding her, he continued. I was respecting her wish for privacy. How convenient. Madam Choi's gaze never left Amina. What is your name, child? Amina Yusuf, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you. Is it? We'll see. She stepped closer, circling Amina like a predator. You're very beautiful. But beauty is common. Beauty fades. What else do you bring to my son's life? Here it was, the first test, and Amina felt Min Jae tense beside her. She could play it safe, be demure, give the expected answer. Or she could be honest, be herself, and risk everything. I bring honesty, Amina said, meeting Madam Choi's eyes directly. I bring the perspective of someone who has had to fight for everything she has. I bring respect for your culture while maintaining pride in my own. I bring no illusions about what your family is or what your son does, and the strength to stand beside him anyway. The silence stretched for 5 long seconds. Then Madam Choi's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Interesting. Come, let me show you to your rooms. We have tea in 1 hour. As they followed her into the house, Min-jae leaned down and whispered, "That was either brilliant or suicidal." "Sometimes they're the same thing," Amina whispered back. The guest suite they gave her was larger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. A stylist was already waiting with a selection of dresses, each more expensive than anything Amina had ever worn. She chose a deep blue dress that reminded her of Lagos nights, something that honored Korean elegance while maintaining her own style. When she emerged an hour later, Min-jae was waiting in the corridor, and the way he looked at her made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "You look stunning," he said. "I look expensive," she corrected. "There's a difference." "No. You make the dress look expensive." "There's a difference." He offered his arm. "Ready for round 2? The tea ceremony was torture disguised as hospitality. The entire family gathered in a formal room, sitting on cushions around a low table, and Amina felt every eye assessing her. Chairman Choi was exactly as intimidating as his photos suggested, a man in his 70s with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter. Dae-hyun was friendly but clearly shocked by his brother's choice. Soo-jin was the only warm presence, smiling genuinely at Amina. And then there was Director Han, a family business associate who looked at Amina like she was something disgusting he'd stepped in. "So, Miss Yusuf," Chairman Choi began, his voice like gravel, "my son tells me you work for a non-profit organization." It took Amina a second to remember the cover story. "I volunteer with them, yes. International Education Initiatives." Volunteer. He made the words sound suspicious. "And how do you support yourself?" Min-jae's hand found hers under the table, but she didn't need the support. "I work several jobs to fund my own education and support my family in Nigeria." "Several jobs," Director Han repeated mockingly in Korean, not realizing she understood. "How common." Amina switched to Korean without missing a beat. "Yes, very common among people who believe in earning their own way rather than inheriting everything." The room went silent. Director Han's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Chairman Choi's eyebrows rose slightly. Madam Choi made a small sound that might have been approval. And Min-jae's hand tightened on hers, not in warning but in support. "You speak Korean," Soo-jin said delightedly, breaking the tension. "Min-jae didn't tell us." "My brother rarely tells us anything," Dae-hyun added with a laugh. But Director Han wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "Tell me, Miss Yusuf, what does your father do?" "He was a teacher," Amina replied evenly. "He passed away when I was 16. "I'm sorry for your loss," Madam Choi said, and this time she sounded genuine. Director Han pressed on. "And your mother?" "Also deceased. I've been supporting myself and my younger sister since I was 18. "How tragic," Director Han said in a tone that made it clear he thought it was anything but. "And now you found a very wealthy Korean man. How fortunate." Min-jae stood so fast his teacup clattered. His voice was deadly quiet. "Director Han, I think you should leave." "I'm only saying what everyone is thinking," Han protested. "No," Chairman Choi interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You're saying what you're thinking. And it reflects poorly on you, not on her." Director Han left, and the tea ceremony continued, but everything had shifted. Madam Choi engaged Amina in conversation about Nigerian culture with genuine curiosity. Soo-jin peppered her with questions about how she and Min-jae met, and Amina delivered the prepared story with enough authentic detail to make it convincing. Even Chairman Choi seemed to thaw slightly, asking about her sister's studies. But it was after the ceremony, when Min-jae walked her back to her suite, that everything changed. "I'm sorry about Director Han," he said as they stopped outside her door. "I should have warned you about him." "I've dealt with worse," Amina said, then added more honestly, "though usually I don't have someone defend me like that." Get used to it. His voice was rough with emotion. I meant what I said in the car. I want to know you, Amina. The real you, not the performance version. Min Jae, she said carefully, this is a job. This is a weekend transaction. We both need to remember that. Is it? He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Because it stopped feeling like a transaction the moment you spoke Korean to defend yourself. It stopped being a job when you stood up to my mother. It stopped being pretend when I wanted to break director Hon's jaw for insulting you. This is a bad idea, Amina whispered, but she didn't step back. Probably the worst idea I've ever had. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I saw you at the lounge. And I think you feel it too. She did. God help her, she did. Standing there in that impossibly expensive dress in this impossibly dangerous man's family home, Amina felt something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Want. Pure, reckless want. We shouldn't, she said. I know. This complicates everything. I know. Your family would never accept this being real. I don't care. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. Tell me to stop, Amina. Tell me you don't feel this, and I'll walk away right now. I'll be professional. I'll get you through this weekend and never contact you again. She should have told him to stop. She should have been smart, been careful, protected herself. Instead, she reached up, pulled him down, and kissed him. The kiss exploded between them like something that had been waiting to happen since the moment they met. Min Jae's hands tangled in her hair, and Amina pressed against him, feeling the hard planes of his body, the barely controlled power in the way he held her. His mouth was demanding, hungry, and she met him with equal intensity, all the fear and attraction and impossible chemistry finding release in this one moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min Jae rested his forehead against hers. Amina, he said, her name rough on his tongue. What are we doing? Something stupid, she answered. Something dangerous. Something I'm probably going to regret. But you don't want to stop. No, she kissed him again, softer this time, and felt him shudder against her. I really don't want to stop. They stood there in the hallway, wrapped around each other, and Amina knew that everything had just gotten infinitely more complicated. This wasn't pretend anymore. This was real, and real was terrifying. I should go, she whispered, not moving. You should, he agreed, not releasing her. Finally, reluctantly, they separated. Min Jae stepped back, running a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. The rehearsal dinner is at 7. I'll come get you at 6:30. Okay. Amina. He turned back at the end of the hallway. I'm not sorry about any of this. I know I should be, but I'm not. Neither was she, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The rehearsal dinner was held in the estate's formal dining room, a space that could have seated 50 but felt intimate with just the immediate family and closest associates. Amina wore a burgundy dress that the stylist had selected, and when Min Jae saw her, his eyes darkened with want that he didn't try to hide. Throughout the dinner, his hand kept finding hers under the table, their fingers interlacing, his thumb stroking her palm in a way that made concentration impossible. They played their roles perfectly, the devoted couple, but now there was truth underneath the performance. When he laughed at something she said, it was genuine. When she leaned into him, it wasn't for show. Soo-jin noticed. Amina caught her watching them with a knowing smile, and later, when the men stepped out to smoke cigars, Soo-jin cornered her in the powder room. It's real, isn't it? She asked without preamble. Whatever is between you and my brother. Amina considered lying, then decided against it. It's becoming real. Which is probably a disaster waiting to happen. Why a disaster? Because I'm a Nigerian woman with no money, no connections, and no business being in your family's world. Because your parents will never truly accept me. Because Min Jae's life is dangerous, and I have responsibilities that don't include dodging bullets. Soo-jin studied her for a long moment. My brother has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. In 36 years, I've never seen him genuinely happy until this weekend. That's worth something. Is it worth enough? Amina asked quietly. That's for you and Min Jae to decide. But for what it's worth, I hope you decide it is. Later that night, Amina couldn't sleep. The estate was enormous and confusing, but she found her way to the garden, needing air, needing space to think. The mountains were black silhouettes against a star-filled sky, and the cool air helped clear her head. She was standing by a koi pond when she heard voices, harsh and arguing in Korean. She moved closer to the sound, staying in the shadows, and realized it was Min Jae and his father in a private courtyard. This is unacceptable, Chairman Choi was saying. A Nigerian woman? What are you thinking? I'm thinking she's intelligent, strong, and capable. More capable than any of the women you've tried to set me up with. She's an outsider. She knows nothing of our world, our business, our responsibilities. She knows more than you think. Min Jae's voice was tight with anger. And she handles pressure better than most of our own people. This isn't about handling pressure. This is about legacy, about family, about maintaining what we've built. You need someone who understands the life, who comes from similar circumstances. Someone you can control, you mean? Someone who won't become a liability. Chairman Choi's voice rose. Do you know what could happen if our enemies discovered you care about this woman? She becomes a target, a weakness, a way to destroy you. Then I'll protect her. You can't protect someone 24 hours a day, Min Jae. You know this. Your world is too dangerous for someone like her. Amina felt something cold settle in her stomach. He was right, wasn't he? Chairman Choi was absolutely right. What was she thinking, getting involved with someone whose life included enemies and danger and violence? She had Zainab to think about, a future to build, a life that didn't include looking over her shoulder constantly. She was about to slip away when a hand closed over her mouth, and she was pulled back into the darkness. Her training, minimal as it was, kicked in, and she started to fight, but a familiar voice whispered urgently, Miss Yusuf, don't scream. It's Tae-sung, head of security. She stopped struggling, and he released her, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. He was a compact man in his 40s with a scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too much. You need to come with me, he said quietly. Now. There's been a security breach. What kind of breach? The kind that means you're not safe out here alone. He was already moving, and Amina followed, her heart racing. They went through a back entrance into the main house, and Tae-sung led her through corridors she hadn't seen before, finally stopping at a heavy door that he opened with a keycard. Inside was a security control room with multiple monitors showing every angle of the estate. And on one screen, Amina could see 3 men in black, heavily armed, moving through the perimeter fence they had just cut through. Who are they? She asked. Rivals. Enemies. People who want to hurt this family. Tae-sung was already on his radio, speaking rapid Korean. You're going to the safe room with the family. Mr. Choi's orders. Where is Min Jae? Handling the situation. He saw her face and his expression softened slightly. He's good at this, Miss Yusuf. The best I've ever seen. He'll be fine. But Amina wasn't worried about Min Jae's capabilities. She was worried about him being in danger at all, about him facing armed men while she hid in a safe room. When had that happened? When had she started caring more about his safety than her own? Tae-sung escorted her to a reinforced room in the center of the house where the family was already gathering. Madam Choi was calm but tense, comforting a frightened Soo-jin. Dae-hyun and his fiancée held hands, their faces pale. Chairman Choi stood by the door, a phone to his ear, orchestrating the response. Where is Min Jae? Madam Choi demanded when she saw Amina enter with Tae-sung alone. Perimeter defense, ma'am. He insisted. Madam Choi's face tightened, but she nodded. Of course he did. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Amina's life. They could hear nothing from inside the safe room, had no way of knowing what was happening outside. Sujin tried to make small talk, but it fell flat. Chairman Choi paced like a caged animal. And Amina sat there, terrified, realizing that somewhere in the last 48 hours she had fallen for a man whose life meant this could happen at any moment. When the door finally opened, Amina's heart leaped, but it wasn't Min Jae. It was Tae-sung again, his face grim. Situation contained. 3 hostiles neutralized, 1 captured for questioning. No casualties on our side. But, he looked directly at Amina, Mr. Choi is requesting Miss Yusuf specifically. Why? Chairman Choi demanded. He didn't say, sir. Just that he needs to see her immediately. Amina stood on shaking legs and followed Tae-sung out. He led her through the house to a side entrance, and there was Min Jae, blood on his shirt, a cut across his cheekbone, looking like he'd just walked through hell. When he saw her, something in his face broke. Are you hurt? He demanded, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hands were on her face, her arms, checking for injuries. Did they get near you? Did anyone touch you? I'm fine, she managed. Min Jae, you're bleeding. I don't care. He pulled her against him, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When Tae-sung told me you were outside during the breach, when I thought they might have gotten to you, his voice cracked. I can't do this, Amina. I can't put you in danger like this. She pulled back to look at him, seeing the fear and anguish in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying my father was right. My world is too dangerous for you. I was selfish to bring you here, selfish to kiss you, selfish to want you when wanting you puts a target on your back. Don't I get a say in this? Amina's voice was sharp with anger now. Don't I get to decide what risks I'm willing to take? Not when the risk is your life. You think I don't live with risk? She stepped back, and her own anger was rising now, hot and fierce. You think being a black woman in Seoul is safe? You think working 3 jobs and walking home alone at 3 a.m. through Itaewon is safe? You think I haven't spent my entire adult life looking over my shoulder, calculating danger, surviving in a world that barely sees me as human? Don't tell me your world is too dangerous for me when I already live in danger every single day. Min Jae stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Amina. I'm not some delicate thing that needs protecting, she continued. I'm a survivor. I've been surviving since I was 16 years old. And yes, your world is dangerous, but at least in your world, I'd have someone watching my back. At least in your world, I wouldn't be invisible. You could never be invisible to me, he said quietly. That's the problem. You're all I see. The anger drained out of her, replaced by something deeper, more terrifying. What are we doing, Min Jae? Really doing? I don't know. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. But I know I don't want to stop. I know that having you here this weekend has been the most real thing I've felt in years. I know that when I thought you might be hurt, nothing else mattered. Not the business, not family expectations, not anything. Just you. That's dangerous, Amina whispered. I know. But I'm done pretending otherwise. He pulled her close again, more gently this time, and pressed his lips to her forehead. Stay. Please. Not for the money, not for the act. Stay because you want to. Stay because this, whatever this is between us, is worth the risk. And standing there in the darkness, blood on his shirt and fear in both their hearts, Amina made a choice that would change everything. Okay. I'll stay. Min Jae insisted she stay in his suite that night, not for anything improper, he said, but because it was the most secure room in the house. Amina didn't argue. She was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and the thought of being alone after everything that had happened made her chest tight with anxiety. His suite was masculine and minimalist, all dark wood and clean lines, with floor-to-ceiling windows that somehow managed to feel secure rather than exposed. He gave her clothes to sleep in, one of his t-shirts that smelled like him, and showed her the bathroom while he went to shower off the blood and evidence of violence. When he emerged 20 minutes later, clean but with fresh bandages on his knuckles and that cut on his cheek, Amina was sitting on his couch, unable to stop shaking. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, and everything was hitting her at once. The danger. The kiss. The realization that she had feelings for a man whose life included armed intruders and casual violence. Min Jae knelt in front of her immediately, taking her hands. Amina. Look at me. You're safe. I promise you're safe. For how long? She asked, and her voice broke. For tonight? For this weekend? What about next week? Next month? If this becomes real, if we actually do this, when am I safe? I won't lie to you, he said, and his honesty was both terrible and necessary. My life comes with risks. But I have resources, security, people whose entire job is to protect what's mine. And you would be mine, Amina. Which means you would have protection that most people in this world could never dream of. Is that supposed to be romantic? She asked, but there was no heat in it. No. It's supposed to be honest. His thumbs stroked over her knuckles. I'm not going to sell you some fantasy where we ride off into the sunset and everything is perfect. My world is dark and complicated and sometimes violent. But I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. I can promise you that anyone who even thinks about hurting you will answer to me. And I can promise you that what I feel for you is real, even if it happened impossibly fast. What do you feel? Amina asked, needing to hear him say it. I feel like I've been waiting for you without knowing it. I feel like you walked into my life and exposed every lie I've been telling myself about being fine alone. I feel terrified and alive and desperate not to lose this before it even really begins. He moved closer, still kneeling, his eyes intense on hers. I'm falling for you, Amina. Falling hard and fast, and I know that's crazy because we barely know each other, but it's true. She cupped his face, careful of the cut on his cheek. I'm falling too. And it's terrifying because I don't fall. I don't let myself need people. I can't afford to need people. But I need you, Min Jae, and that scares me more than the guns or the danger or any of it. He kissed her then, soft and deep, and it was different from before. There was still heat, still that electric chemistry, but there was also tenderness, promise, the beginning of something real. When they broke apart, he stood and pulled her to her feet. Sleep in my bed, he said. I'll take the couch. Min Jae. I want to, he interrupted gently. I want to know you're comfortable and safe. And I need to know I can control myself around you, that this isn't just physical, even though the physical part is driving me insane. She should have argued, should have insisted on the couch herself, but she was too tired and too emotionally raw. So she climbed into his bed, which smelled like him and felt like safety, and watched as he settled on the couch with a blanket. Their eyes met across the room. Good night, Amina. Good night, Min Jae. She didn't sleep much, and she suspected he didn't either. But there was something profound about sharing space with him, about being vulnerable together, about choosing to stay despite all the reasons to run. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. Today was the wedding, the event they were supposedly here for, though it felt like a lifetime ago that this had been the plan. Amina woke to find Min Jae already gone, a note on the pillow next to her in surprisingly elegant handwriting. Breakfast is being brought to you at 8. The stylist will come at 9. I'll see you at the ceremony at 2. Last night meant everything to me. The wedding ceremony was held in a beautiful garden pavilion on the estate, traditional Korean elements blended with modern touches. Amina sat in the family section, next to Soo-jin, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. Min Jae was standing with his brother, looking devastating in a perfectly tailored suit, and every time his eyes found hers across the space, her heart stuttered. The ceremony was in Korean, but Min Jae had arranged for someone to quietly translate for Amina, and she found herself moved by the ritual, by the commitment being made, by the way Dae-hyun looked at his bride like she was his entire world. Was it possible to have that? Could she and Min Jae ever have something this open, this celebrated? When the ceremony ended and the guests moved to the reception in the grand ballroom, Min Jae found her immediately, his hand settling on the small of her back in a gesture that felt both possessive and protective. "You look beautiful," he murmured. The stylist had put her in a dress that was a modern take on traditional Nigerian patterns in Korean silk, and the way Min Jae looked at her made her feel powerful. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, and he laughed, that rare, genuine laugh that transformed his face. The reception was a blur of introductions and toasts and elaborate courses. Amina met dozens of people whose names she immediately forgot, all of them assessing her with varying degrees of approval or disapproval. But with Min Jae's hand in hers, with his quiet support and obvious affection, she found herself caring less about their opinions. They danced, and it was the first time they'd held each other like this in front of everyone, no pretense, just them. Min Jae pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers, and they moved together like they'd been doing this for years. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That this might actually be possible," she admitted. "Us. That maybe we could figure this out." "We will figure it out," he said with certainty. "I don't care what obstacles we face. I don't care what my family says or what your concerns are about danger or cultural differences or anything else. We'll find a way." "You sound very sure." "I am sure. Because I've never wanted anything the way I want this. Want you." Amina was about to respond when she saw Min Jae's expression change, his eyes going hard and dangerous as he looked over her shoulder. "Get behind me," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Now." And that's when the gunfire started. Remember how this story started, with Amina on the floor and Min Jae covering her body with his? Now you understand how they got there. Now you understand what they were fighting for. Because it wasn't just survival. It was each other. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests screaming, running, diving under tables. Security personnel appeared from everywhere, returning fire, creating a perimeter around the family. Min Jae had Amina pressed against a wall, his body completely covering hers, and she could feel his heart hammering against her back. "Don't move," he commanded. "No matter what you see, no matter what happens, you stay right here." "Min Jae, promise me." His voice was harsh with fear. "Promise me you'll stay here." "I promise." He kissed her hard and fast, then moved, and she saw him transform into someone else entirely. The businessman, the gentleman, the man who had held her tenderly, all disappeared. In their place was a trained killer, moving with lethal precision, a gun appearing in his hand from somewhere. She watched him take down one attacker, then another, his movements efficient and brutal. Tae-sung was suddenly there, pulling Amina toward the safe room, but she fought him, unable to take her eyes off Min Jae, terrified that this would be the last time she saw him alive. "I need to stay. He needs me. What he needs is for you to be safe." Tae-sung practically dragged her through a side door, through corridors, back to that reinforced room where the family was gathering again. But this time was different. This time, people were injured. Daehyun's bride had been grazed by a bullet, and blood soaked through her beautiful white dress. This time, the fear was palpable, suffocating. "How many?" Chairman Choi demanded when Tae-sung sealed them in. "At least 5 attackers, sir. Maybe more. Mr. Choi and the security team are handling it." "Min Jae is out there alone?" Madam Choi's voice cracked. "No, ma'am. He has 12 of our best with him. But the attackers came prepared. Professional military tactics." The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. Amina sat with her arms wrapped around herself, shaking, praying to a God she wasn't sure she still believed in. "Please let him be okay. Please let him survive. Please let me have the chance to tell him I love him." Because she did. Somewhere between Thursday night and Sunday evening, somewhere between a business transaction and bullets flying, Amina had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Choi Min Jae. And the thought of losing him now, before they'd even really begun, was unbearable. When the door finally opened, She was on her feet before her brain registered movement. But it wasn't Min Jae. It was Tae-sung again, and his face was grim. "We need medical," he said shortly. "Mr. Choi is injured." Amina's world tilted. "How badly?" "He's conscious. Demanding to see Miss Yusuf. But he needs a hospital." She was moving before anyone could stop her, pushing past Tae-sung, running through the corridors toward the ballroom. The scene she found was from a nightmare. Bodies on the ground, some moving, some not. Blood everywhere. Security personnel securing the perimeter, calling for ambulances, checking the fallen attackers. And Min Jae, sitting against a wall, holding his side where blood seeped between his fingers, looking pale but alive. So blessedly alive. "Amina," he said when he saw her and tried to stand. "Don't you dare move." She was beside him in seconds, pressing her hands over his, trying to stop the bleeding. "You idiot. You absolute idiot. You could have been killed. But I wasn't." His free hand came up to touch her face. "You're okay. That's all that matters. All that matters. Min Jae, you're bleeding. You're hurt. I've had worse." He was smiling slightly, and she wanted to hit him and kiss him and never let him go. "Amina, listen to me. I need to say this in case." "Don't." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Don't you dare give me a just-in-case speech. You're going to be fine. The ambulance is coming. You're going to be fine." "I'm going to be fine," he agreed. "But I still need to say it. I love you. I know it's too soon and too fast and too crazy, but I love you. And if you'll have me, if you'll take the risk, I want this. I want us. I want everything with you." She kissed him, tasting salt from her tears, feeling him wince when she pressed too close to his injury but not caring because he was alive and he loved her, and somehow, impossibly, this disaster of a weekend had turned into the best thing that ever happened to her. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "And yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to the risk and the danger and the crazy. Yes to you." If you've made it this far in the story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if Amina and Min Jae's story has got you in your feelings, and make sure you're subscribed because trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. The ambulance came. Min Jae was taken to a private hospital where the Choi family had doctors on retainer, doctors who knew how to treat gunshot wounds without asking questions. Amina rode with him, holding his hand, and refused to leave his side through the surgery to repair the damage, through the recovery, through everything. The aftermath was messy and complicated. Police were involved, though the Choi family lawyers handled most of it with impressive efficiency. The attackers were a rival organization trying to make a statement, and Chairman Choi's response was swift and brutal enough that Amina didn't ask for details. Daehyun's wedding was ruined, though he and his bride seemed more concerned about Min Jae than about the ceremony. And through it all, Amina stayed. She called Zainab and told her a carefully edited version of events. She used the money Min Jae had paid her to solve her immediate problems, then gave the rest back to him, because this wasn't about money anymore. She met with Madam Choi, who surprised her by saying, "You didn't run. When the bullets started flying, you wanted to stay with my son. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." 3 days after the wedding, when Min Jae was cleared to leave the hospital, Amina stood in his private room trying to figure out what came next. They'd been living in a bubble of crisis and intensity, but now reality was crashing back in. She still had jobs to get back to, responsibilities, a life that didn't include being the girlfriend of a crime lord. "What are you thinking?" Min Jae asked from the bed. He looked better, color returning to his face, though he still moved carefully. "That I don't know how this works in the real world," Amina admitted. "We met under extraordinary circumstances. We fell for each other during a crisis. But what happens when we go back to Seoul? When you have business meetings and I have shifts at the cafe? When your family is breathing down your neck and I'm trying to finish my degree? How do we make this work?" Min Jae was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come here." She sat on the edge of his bed, and he took her hand, threading their fingers together. Here's what I know. I know I want to wake up with you. I know I want to have coffee with you before I go to work and hear about your day when I get home. I know I want to help you finish your degree and bring your sister to Seoul if that's what you want. I know I want to introduce you as my girlfriend, not my fake girlfriend, to everyone who matters. And I know that I'll do whatever it takes to make you feel safe and loved and valued. Min Jae. Let me finish. His grip tightened on her hand. I'm not asking you to give up your life or your independence or anything that makes you who you are. I'm asking if you'll let me be part of it. Let me support you while you support yourself. Let me protect you while you stay strong. Let me love you while you figure out if you can love me too. I already told you I love you, she said, smiling through fresh tears. You told me while I was bleeding out. I wasn't sure if it counted. She laughed and carefully climbed onto the bed beside him, mindful of his injury. It counted. It counts. All of it counts. They kissed, slow and sweet, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning instead of an ending. The first few months were hard. Amina moved into Min Jae's Gangnam apartment, which took adjustment for both of them. She kept one of her jobs, refusing to be entirely dependent on him, and finished her degree with his quiet support and encouragement. She met more of his family, endured more scrutiny, slowly won over even the skeptics with her intelligence and unwillingness to be intimidated. She learned more about his business, the legal parts and the parts that existed in gray areas, and made her peace with loving a man whose world included violence. Min Jae learned to share his space, his life, his carefully controlled existence. He cut back on the most dangerous aspects of his work, delegating to others, trying to build something that wouldn't require him to risk his life regularly. He met Zainab when she visited, welcomed her like family, and slowly began to understand what Amina meant when she talked about the responsibility of being someone's only remaining family. They fought sometimes, spectacular arguments about safety and independence and cultural differences and family expectations. But they also learned how to fight fair, how to communicate, how to love each other through the hard parts. A year after the wedding, Min Jae took Amina back to Pyeongchang, to the estate, for a quiet weekend. They walked through the gardens where she'd overheard his father's concerns, and she noticed that he seemed nervous, which was unusual. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. That's the problem." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Amina, this year with you has been the best year of my life. You challenge me and support me and refuse to let me hide behind walls. You make me want to be better, do better, build something worth leaving behind. You make me happy in a way I didn't know was possible." Min Jae. Her heart was starting to race because she recognized the tone, the setup. He dropped to one knee and pulled out a small box. "I know we said we'd take things slow. I know there are still complications to work through. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The ring was stunning, a Nigerian emerald surrounded by diamonds, a perfect blend of their two cultures. But more than the ring, more than the romantic setting, what got her was the look in his eyes. Vulnerability and hope and love and fear all mixed together. "Yes," she said, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, you crazy, dangerous, wonderful man. Yes." They got married 6 months later in a ceremony that blended Korean and Nigerian traditions, with both their families present and surprisingly harmonious. Madam Choi cried. Chairman Choi gave a speech about strength and character that made Amina cry. Zainab served as maid of honor and charmed everyone she met. And Min Jae looked at Amina like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. The years that followed brought children, a son with Amina's eyes and Min Jae's smile, then a daughter with Min Jae's intensity and Amina's fierce independence. They brought gradual shifts in the family business toward more legitimate operations, Min Jae using his intelligence and resources to build something that wouldn't require his children to make the same moral compromises he had. They brought Zainab to Seoul permanently, helped her start her own business, watched her thrive. They brought challenges too. Racism that never fully disappeared. Cultural misunderstandings. Security scares that reminded them the danger never entirely went away. Arguments about how to raise the children, what to tell them about their father's past, how to honor both their heritages. But through it all, they had each other. And they had the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes a fake relationship becomes the realest thing you've ever known. Sometimes a weekend transaction turns into a lifetime commitment. Sometimes a desperate woman and a dangerous man find exactly what they need in each other. 5 years after that first weekend, Amina stood in their home, watching Min-jae teach their son Korean words while their daughter napped, and she thought about how far they'd come. From the Lotus Club to this, from survival mode to actually living, from pretending to the most authentic love she'd ever known. Min-jae looked up and caught her watching, and his smile was soft and intimate, the one he saved just for her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how I almost said no," she admitted. "About how close I came to walking away that first morning." "I would have found another way to convince you," he said confidently. "You think so? I know so. You were always meant to be mine, Amina. From the moment I saw you at the lounge, before I even knew your name, I knew. Some part of me knew." She crossed the room and kissed him, their son making exaggerated gagging noises that made them both laugh. "I'm glad you're so sure." "Always," Min-jae promised. "For the rest of our lives, I'll always be sure about you." And standing there in their home, surrounded by the family they'd built and the life they'd created against all odds, Amina was sure too. Sure that taking the risk had been worth it. Sure that love, even when it came wrapped in danger and impossibility, was always worth fighting for. Sure that sometimes the best answer to an impossible question was simply yes. So if you're watching this and wondering whether to take a risk on love, whether to say yes to something scary and complicated and potentially wonderful, let Amina and Min-jae's story be your answer. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most rewarding. Sometimes fake becomes real. Sometimes a weekend changes everything. Thanks for watching their story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to know if Amina and Min-jae's love story resonated with you, and what part of their journey hit you the hardest. Until next time, remember that the best love stories are the ones worth fighting for.